is Peg. Okay. Our guest today is Peg Peters. Peg has a really interesting background. He is an ordained minister and he's worked as a university professor. He started a charity to bring water to Ethiopia. I think Peg, more than 1 million people now have access to water thanks to the work that you've done. And the reason that we're here now is you started this um, organization gathering groups, and it was driven out of your desire to build connections um, using psychedelics as a point of connection. And so I'm love to hear more about that. I know you're involved in a clinical trial right now with Essex University on psychedelic therapy, psychedelic assisted therapy, and you're in particular looking at how the experience differs when you do journeys through groups, and what are the benefits that we realize through those kinds of journeys. So I'm going to kind of let you give yourself a bit of an introduction to gathering groups and tell us what you're all about.
Thanks, Karen. And it's great to see a couple of folks live here. I know that we're recording it for a larger group, which is great, but it's always nice when we're doing Zoom. There's actually real humans here, so that's great. So good to see some of you. And we're really hoping, when Karen and I chatted about this, we're really hoping that this is really live and interactive rather than just being a kind of a download presentation. You can download that from the internet from places, but we really want this to be informative, but also really draw in your questions. Real practitioners are having real questions about how do we bring these really interesting medicines that are being researched, how do we bring them into our society safely, and how do we do that? So they're accessible for people. So this isn't just, hey, I got $10,000 and I can fly to Costa Rica for some ayahuasca, and it's just for the elite and for the rich. How do we make these accessible for average Canadians who really need help? So that's what our hope is from this conversation. Yeah, so my name is Peg, and a little bit about who I am. Yeah, as Karen mentioned, my background is as at one time in my life, was an ordained minister and did a lot of work in building community and working in the kind of in social justice realms. Worked for 15 years doing empowerment work in East Africa with women's collectives and working with them to get access to clean water for girls who typically in Ethiopia walk 6 hours a day to find water, and which means they can't go to school. So by intervening at water, we were able to get girls into school, and we were able to bring clean water to millions of people. I really learned something in that process, and we'll get into that in a second. So that's a little bit of my background. I have 4 daughters. They're all in their 20s. So I'm a girl dad, and that is a huge part of the joy of my life of getting to not just hang out and connect with my daughters, but actually they are involved in our work here as we're a nonprofit. And so Gathering Groups is a not-for-profit, and we're becoming a charity in Canada right now. And It's really cool because our daughters we have one is a nurse and one is a therapist, and so we bring them in and they work in our model as well. So it's really cool to get to work with our kids as well, doing plant medicine work. So it's pretty cool. So I think a little bit of a background about why gathering groups, what kind of got us into this group model, and particularly maybe psychedelics. I grew up with the war on drugs. I did not explore psychedelics. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and psychedelics just seemed so bizarre and weird and foreign to me. And I thought they would, fry my brain or make me go crazy or something like that. And it wasn't actually, it wasn't until 2016, our oldest daughter, unbeknownst to us, she has Crohn's disease, and she was really struggling as a teenager with her Crohn's. Very painful, just really struggled in and out of the hospital. And one day she came to my wife and I and said, Mom and Dad, I want to sit you guys down. I did something yesterday that it really changed me, and I need you to hear about it. And we were like, what are you talking about? Like any kid that says, can you sit down? A lot of fear came up. And she said, I sat with a friend and did a high dose psilocybin mushroom experience, and I need to tell you about it. And we did, immediately my brain went to, how did you know they're not filled with fentanyl and, and tainted? And I just, all that fear came up as a father. But as we sat and listened to her, she did a 6 gram mushroom trip with a friend holding space, and it really changed her life. And she talked about encountering some kind of divine feminine force. It was really weird to me, but what happened in the next 6 months and a year was an absolute change in who our daughter was in connection with her body and her disease. A sense of peace came over her, a deep sense of making peace with her Crohn's disease, which was a really, it was an amazing kind of thing to watch. And about 6 months, I kind of watched my daughter having this one trip changed her who she was, her confidence, her sense of what was important. A deeply spirituality came over her that wasn't cheesy. It was just deep and solid. And I recognized that there's something really interesting about this medicine that she had used, and I couldn't call it a drug anymore. This was my daughter, who I thought had taken drugs, but she hadn't. She had worked with a spiritual plant medicine, and it changed her life. And so I really began to research this, and I wasn't quick to like, oh, I want to take it myself. I began to research this and try to look at it. Like, what is this? What is this substance? And quickly came across the work of Bill Richards at Johns Hopkins. And his work, he was a credible researcher coming at Hopkins in their revitalized program that they were doing there, working with end of life cancer patients. And by about 2017, a couple years later, I finally said, okay, I want to have my own experience here. This stuff looks really fascinating. And so after a long process of trying to find an underground therapist that I could trust, I found one in Vancouver, and I had a high dose psilocybin experience for myself for the first time. And it was absolutely life-changing for me. I struggle with ADHD. It's been something that I've been navigating my whole life. And I've tried medications and on and off, but really just haven't found anything that's really helped. This experience, I mean, that was just one element, but for the first time in my life, for these 5 hours, there was a calm inside my mind that I had never experienced. I mean, I just wept. My experience of what my ADHD felt like was like 20 people talking to me at once all the time. And I had to work hard to, do stuff to keep me moving. And this just gave me a deep sense of peace. And I felt like I had agency over my thought. And that was a new experience for me. It was deeply spiritual as well. Again, I had been a minister, but I had walked away from the church for a number of reasons. How the Protestant church engaged women in leadership, I couldn't get behind that. I had real struggle with how same-sex marriage was being handled in the church at that time, and I couldn't be part of that. And so I had kind of left the kind of Christian religion because of so much of the baggage that had come with it. This first psychedelic experience kind of pulled me back into spirituality in a way without religion. And rather than seeing some kind of divine God outside that I need to be saved from, that was so fear driven, that's what I had grown up with. I recognized that the divine was in all of us all along. And it's these layers in our trauma and our pain that really kind of prevent us from recognizing our true who we really are, or as IFS says, our true self is inside, right? And so that was a profound experience for me, that first journey. I began to look around to say, well, how do we bring this kind of work into mental health work? I mean, I had done a lot of chaplaincy work, worked in hospitals, done a lot of this with end of life kind of patients, and I thought this would be an incredible medicine to help people. And so by about 2020, just before COVID, a friend of mine, her name was Lori Brooks. She was diagnosed with cancer, and so she had been a good friend of ours, been part of our faith community. She had also kind of left the church, but she was diagnosed with this cancer. And I said to Lori, I said, Lori, I'm a storyteller and a filmmaker. Would you be open to taking psilocybin in a therapeutic way and letting me interview you before and after on camera? I really think your story could be profound. And so she said yes. Long story short, I was able to produce a film called Dose 2, Trip of a Lifetime. And it was a documentary film about my friend Lori. And so I was executive producer behind that. And what that story really began to unfold is I began to have access, because I was doing the documentary, began access to some of the leading thinkers in psychedelics at that time. So I got to interview them for this. Bill Richards, Paul Stamets, a mycologist, researcher, and I just, Dennis McKenna. I interviewed all these, these interesting people. And the people that I found most interesting were the folks that were just finishing up a clinical trial at Imperial College London. And Dr. Rosalind Watts was her name. And she had finished this clinical trial around depression and psilocybin. And she said to me in the interview, Peg, there's no question that psilocybin, giving a high dose of psilocybin, can give people a lift. But my research is showing that 6 months later, these people can go back into their depression. And I'm like, what? I thought it was a magic pill. I thought we can just dose people and it'll all be perfect. Like what? And she said, no, that's not how it works. She said, we really need to do better research on recognizing the setting that we do it in and the integration that we give to these people after. And that really woke me up to recognizing that this medicine didn't work like a typical drug. This wasn't just like a drug that you could give like a Tylenol or, some kind of Ozempic or whatever, and you just see a, direct result of what it does. This molecule seemed to work best when it is done in a certain set and setting and done with certain levels of integration. And so I began to discover the work of someone on the island. They had an organization at Vancouver Island University, and her name was Dr. Shannon Dames. Now, Dr. Shannon Dames was doing research on with ketamine on resilience groups. Now, this really fascinated me. And and so when I interviewed her for the documentary, she talked about the power of groups. And she said we would put these groups of nurses, she was working on resilience for burnout for nurses. And she said, when we bring people into a group setting and then give them ketamine at week 4 in a 12-week program, at week 6, and then again at week 8, she was tracking these, and ketamine, as you know, is a drug that they use in the Emerge. And it's kind of a dissociative. It's not a typical psychedelic, even though it can have psychedelic-like qualities. But they were using it because it was legal. And so I asked to get kind of trained in this protocol of what they were doing with groups. I'd done a lot of group work in my past, but not with psychedelics. But I really liked the process that she was putting forward with this Roots to Thrive model that she was working on. And although it was ketamine, I felt like there was something really powerful for us to learn about this group process. And so my brother was a physician, and so him and I went through it with a group of nurses and psychologists and therapists, and we started a ketamine-based program out here in the Fraser Valley using this group process. But ketamine has a lot of limitations, and although again it's the best legal thing we have to do to kind of get some lift for people that can be stuck, it just was nothing like I had done ketamine, but it was nothing like my experience with psilocybin. And so I took the model and with their blessing began to really workshop it and tweak it and say, what if we use this model to work with psilocybin? And so we ended up, we tried it in different kind of iterations. Is it a 4-week prep? Is it a 6-week? And we kept on workshopping it. And I ran about 20 groups over the first year or two until we really landed on a model that we were getting the results that we wanted. And so after about 20 iterations, we landed on a protocol. And that was effective. And so we ended up starting a nonprofit called Gathering Groups. And the way that works is there's 8 individuals that gets pre-screened. They come into a group. It's all online. So you get screened online. You get placed in a group online. They meet once a week for 8 weeks in a community of practice. And I'll unpack what that looks like. Community of practice is not psychotherapy. And that's really important to understand. It's not psychotherapy driven. It's a resilience model where the facilitators are part of the ongoing process with the practitioners, with the participants. So there's a process that happens. They answer a question each week. Their shares are timed. There's a certain way of responding. We can get into kind of the specificities of how it works, but it's a very tightly run 90 minutes. No one can dominate because the shares are timed. You have 3 minutes to share from your heart in response to a pre question that you get emailed out each week. Then you have a certain way of responding to each other, which is called embodied listening. This allows people to feel seen and heard. And what this does is it co-regulates the nervous systems. This is a polyvagal process that allows the nervous systems to slowly be titrated into safety over the course of 8 weeks. So that by week about 6 or 7, people are saying things like, I've never felt this safe in a group ever in my life. How is this happening? And it's very structured, and that provides predictability. This isn't a discussion. This isn't a book club. This isn't therapy. No one is talking on and on. There's no teaching. It's a community of practice, and this was a game changer for me. This changed everything about how we worked with psychedelics. Recognizing that our goal wasn't how do we prepare people for the psychedelic experience, which is often very education driven. Let me tell you the history of psych. Let me tell you about this. Let me tell you. None of that was happening. This was about preparing the nervous system for an absolute let go. And you can only do that if the nervous system truly feels safe. We're really animals at the end of the day, right? And we're not working with cognition. We're working with the nervous system. And so what we're doing week after week is we're practicing safety and we're practicing vulnerability, and we titrate that vulnerability a little at a time until everyone starts to feel safe, that they can trust this group, that there's no one there to judge them, and that they feel that they are being seen and heard week after week in this group process. And what happens is they come to a retreat for 2 nights. And they take a high dose psilocybin with 4 facilitators present for them in a group of 8. And then they integrate that experience the next day. And then they have 4 more weeks of integration back online. The whole process is 12 weeks. We've done over 100 groups now with almost 900 people going through this process with data being collected, understanding what's working, what isn't, and looking at the percentages of people that are having a challenging trip experience. We're getting those less and less and less, particularly intervening before the psychedelic is given. We are able to now predict almost with 95% accuracy what type of experience people are going to have and how to prepare them for that experience. And so this model now is being looked at by about 3 different universities that we are partnering with as a nonprofit. We're partnering with Exeter University in the UK. We've trained a team over there. We've gone out there, and their trial starts this spring. They're looking at 120 people going through a gathering group style model like this, and they have a whole bunch of measures they're looking at. We're working with Wilfrid Laurier University. We're also partnering with Queen's University in a study looking at this group process for first responders. We're also working with Dr. Tony Back at the University of Washington, who's one of the leading researchers on psychedelics in groups for cancer research. He's just published a paper on the ritual use of psilocybin in a non-religious setting for end-of-life cancer patients. And I can put some links to these kinds of articles that are just being published. Now, why group? Now, we can get into why, but from my experience, group experiences are about I'd say 5 to 8 times more powerful than individual psychedelic sessions. It's not that we want more, bigger dose. We actually bring the dose down for a group process. We want people to feel agency in the room. We want them to be aware of everyone else that's tripping. These are their friends. These become their family. What's happening, the crying, the laughing in the room, we actually teach them to bring that into their own journey. This isn't annoying laughter on the other side of the room. That's your friend. Part of you is with them in this journey. And so what we recognize through this group process is that we can heal best in relational containers because we've been wounded in relational containers. We've been wounded in family structures, in systems of power that are usually collective and group oriented. And most people are very scared of groups. And so, in order to heal the nervous system, we need to put you into safe group containers where you can really co-regulate and feel safe before you take the psilocybin. So that's a little bit about kind of how we got into it, a little bit of the Roots to Thrive background, a bit about my work, both spiritually and then in justice work, and then a little bit about the model that we're working with called Gathering Groups and some of the clinical trials that are now exploring it. That might be enough, Karen, to kind of let you pivot and see which way you want to go, because I can go anywhere you want to go, but let's kind of stop there and see what's kind of connecting.
Um, just on point of disclosure, I've actually been on one of the gathering group journeys with Peg, so I was really excited to be able to get him here as one of our guests. Peg, I wonder if you could speak to the importance of the process, that slow build-up process as you build up the group, to setting the intention, because the going into the journey with intentionality really has a big impact on what people experience and what the outcomes are afterwards.
Yeah, great question, Karen. And I'm going to actually pull back a little bit more. I'm going to mention another, if you can type these in, you can put it in the chat or something. But um, it's really important to understand what's happening when the psilocybin enters the brain, right? So yes, we are moving toward this experience, this really interesting molecule that has an attachment site at the 5H2A receptor in our neural circuits. So what is actually happening? Because once we understand that mechanism of action neurologically, we can then step back and say, well, then what's the best way for us to take this medicine? Because it really relates to what's happening, right? So the person that I really want to recommend is named Dr. Gul Dolen. She is at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Gul Dolen is doing something really fascinating. She is looking at psilocybin and psychedelics and their ability to open what's called the critical period in our brain. Well, what is that? The critical period is a very unique part of human development. It happens between the ages of 0 and about 5 years old. This allows the brain to, it's open when we're at birth, it's wide open, this part of our brain. So we get rapid motor skill development, rapid language acquisition, and rapid social engagement. This is eye contact with your mother. This is high bonding time. This is attachment stuff. All of that happens between 0 and 5. And then what happens in the brain is the brain circuit closes around that and never opens again the rest of your life. So the critical period is fascinating, right? Looking at what happens in the baby development in the 0 5, attachment, walking, language acquisition, and social engagement. Is the world safe? Is it dangerous? Do I attach well or not? Guldolin discovered something fascinating. Psychedelics are the only molecule known to humanity so far that can reopen the critical period of your brain. Now, I want to just stop and just let that sink in. Psychedelics are the only molecule that we know that can reopen the critical period in a person's brain for about 3 to 6 weeks, and then it begins to shut again. So, what is she doing with that? Oh man. You know what she's doing? She's working with stroke victims who have lost the use of the left side of their body from a stroke. She puts them on psilocybin, works with therapists to rewire the brain during that open critical period to allow people to walk again. There's an incredible article and I'm like, where did she get this idea? She got this idea from Outside Magazine. A guy named Jim, I forget his name, Jim. It'll come to me because it's such a fascinating story. Here it is. Yes, Jim Harris. Jim Harris was paralyzed from an accident. He was in a wheelchair. Took psychedelics at a friend's place, and said during the trip, says, I actually can feel my feet right now. This is really weird. He reported this to a friend and began to do some kind of someone got him up and started to walk. He could feel his legs again while he was on the psychedelic. And Jim Harris began to walk again as a result of taking this. And when this was written up in Outside Magazine and Outside, it's called Outside Magazine, Jim Harris, this guy who took magic mushrooms and can walk, Gul Dalin reached out to him and said, I want to look at this, and then discovered that psychedelics could do this, could open the critical period in the brain, and we could rewire things. Now, this is just hard science. This isn't mental health stuff. She's interested in, like, can we rewire the brain to help people that maybe have gone blind? Can we rewire the brain for people that have lost feeling in their arms? And so her research is fascinating. So what does this mean? If it opens the critical period in our brain, that what does that mean? It means obviously there we can do behavioral change during this critical period. We can do a social re-engage socially, and we can re-engage attachment, right? So we can open that up. So if you become like a baby again, she would say that you need to be very careful who you give this to and how you give it, because the brain becomes so neuroplastic and so open, it will grab a hold of and almost kind of bring in whatever you expose it to, you know. So now, what does that mean for us? We want to really slow down the process before someone takes a psychedelic, rather than just, hey, oh, here's a handful of mushrooms and let's, figure it out later. We want to slow the process down at least for 8 weeks to really provide safety, because we want your nervous system to be relaxed and open and receptive to what's about to happen. We can only do that best with the trust build that we do. We call this in therapy, we call this, the trust that you get with a client. We build that trust and safety. Well, what if we could build trust in a group so that the safety is developed between 9 or 10 people? And this is an exponential safety that begins to happen, so that by the time you take the psychedelic and your critical period opens, you begin to have this an openness to re-engage areas of trauma, attachment, wounding. Maybe it's grief loss, maybe it's whatever the issues are, that this group then becomes a safe place for you to re-engage your nervous system in this kind of open critical period. And in essence, to reattach your nervous system again to a healthy mother-father kind of experience, right? And so this is why we slow the process down for 8 weeks, because we know that when we give the psychedelics, there's a huge potential for a massive shift that could happen. We want to just be very gentle about allowing that nervous system to feel safe before we give it. So this is why we have landed on 8 weeks. 9 weeks sometimes is too long. People, 6 weeks isn't enough. 8 weeks seem to be the kind of the magic moment where people are kind of connected, they're excited, they have a sense of belonging with each other before the altered state. I came across an article in Nature magazine, written in 2024. I think I sent it to you, Karen. This is called Social Identity Process and Psychedelics. Now, what is social identity theory? Social identity theory was first put together by a researcher out of Queensland called Alex Haslam. He was a researcher at Exeter, but now he's in Australia. Alex Haslam's work, it really looks at the social determinants of health. And he would put a graph up. I've seen him speak. And he says, let's imagine what you think the top 5 most important things for your longevity is. You're like eating healthy, Mediterranean diet, moving, working out, not even close. Stopping smoking, not even close. Alcohol, not even. By a factor of 10, like when we're talking about research, factors are massive. Do you belong to a group? That's it. Do you belong to any group? That's the thing, is the biggest determinant of your longevity. Do you have any group? Do you curl with a group? Do you go running? Do you knit with someone? Do you watch football with a group? Anyone who belongs to a group, he begins to look at their disorder. Now, and then he looks at the science. Well, why? Why is group identity so important for our health? Like more than stopping smoking. Like, I just want you to think about that, you know? And yet most of us don't know about how important people feeling like they belong in a group is. We think, oh, that's kind of nice, but let's really work at these other things, like their mental health, like are they depressed? He says, no, work at this one thing. And he uses the word belonging. And I've grabbed a hold of that and said, I think he's right. I think the most important thing for humans' well-being on this planet is, do they feel like they belong? And if they don't feel like they belong anywhere, their determinants of health goes down, plummets in remarkable ways. This leads to isolation, loneliness. The epidemic that came out of COVID really exacerbated this. People no longer feel like they belong in spiritual places. Church attendance has dropped. Religion has become kind of an exclusive thing that is about them and us. And so people don't go there. They no longer have places that they really identify and feel like they are known. And so Alex Haslam's work kind of really sparked the curiosity of Dr. Leah Rossman at Exeter and Dr. Martha Newsom, who's at Oxford. And they both said, they came up with this idea that, well, if belonging is the most important thing for the determinants of our mental well-being, what if we can combine a process that really looks at belonging prior to an altered state and then look at a medicine like psilocybin that increases connectivity more than anything else? It increases our connection to ourself, our inner self. It increases connection to external others, a sense that we want to be known by others. We want to connect with our family and friends. And it connects us with the unseen world, things larger than itself, the spirit, the nature, the spirit, whatever. So Rosalind Watts's work on the Watts connectedness scale looks at how psychedelics on its own increases connection. So their article looked at, what if there was a model that built on belonging first and then introduced the psychedelic later. And it was just a theory book, a piece, but I read it and I hit the roof and I said, I've been doing it. We've been doing this. I didn't know, I didn't have the theory behind it. I just intuitively kind of figured this out. I reached out to all the authors and I emailed them the next day and said, hey, I've been running groups. We've done about 50, at least at this time. We've now done 100. We've done 50 groups. We've got data. We'd love to talk to you. They all emailed me back the next day and said, where are you? Where can you do this legally that you're not in jail? And I said, well, we live in British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada. It's got the most liberal drug policies on the planet. And I'm able to live in this gray space and operate without impunity because of the harm reduction laws in British Columbia. And so they said, let's get on a call. So we got on a call, and we've been kind of sending data their way, looking at allowing people to fill out a bunch of questionnaires before they come into a gathering group, just before a retreat, after the 12 weeks, 6-month follow-up, 1 year, and then 2-year follow-ups. So that's pretty good longitudinal data that they're collecting now on our process. And that was really exciting, and that's really got Exeter excited about this model, because they were right that their theory of focusing on belonging first, creating belonging, and that can be measured. Alex Haslam as a very simple measurement tool. I mean, you could have a 20-point belonging scale, but he has the best one he uses is 2 circles like this on a continuum. He asks people, here's your identity of who you are. Here's the group's identity, what it means to be part of a group. Where are you in relation to that group? And when does those 2 circles overlap? And when do you feel like, and this is the ultimate question, the group that I belong to is how does he put it? It can only exist because all of us are part of it. If one of us weren't there, the group wouldn't be as good as it is. Now, when every single person in the group believes that they are an essential part of the thriving nature of that group, you've got absolute belonging now, right? A lot of groups would say, people would say, well, the group can do it without me. I'm not as good. Everyone else is better than me or whatever. That's not belonging. Belonging is measured with this kind of idea that my identity and the group identity is kind of fused so that this group can't work with if I'm not there, right? So we all have to be there for the group to work. That's what we're trying to do in a gathering group. We are trying to create an identity of these groups that would say that every single person in the group, with their uniqueness, with their background, with their pain, with their trauma, that each of them belongs, and not just belongs, but is absolutely essential for what's going to happen on the journey day. That if one person doesn't show up, that journey won't be as good as it could have been if everyone brought who they are, their history, their pain, their uniqueness to the group. And so this is how we form group identity, and so this is why the journeys are not just predictable, but they are incredibly healing toward a sense of love and connection toward each other and toward themselves. And so that's a little bit about kind of how we got into it and what's going on with the psilocybin, with this critical period, and why this prep of 8 weeks is so essential prior to giving a psychedelic like this. I don't know if I answered your question, Karen, but
Yep, you did, and you raised more questions.
okay, good.
I'm curious because this developing the group identity is so important. I'm curious what criteria you use to decide who's going to make up a group.
Yeah. In the beginning, we thought that homogenous groups would be the best. Let's get a bunch of firefighters together. Let's get a bunch of depressed people together. Let's get a bunch of postpartum women. These are groups we were trying, right? But the groups that seemed to perform better where there wasn't homogenous, that it was actually diverse. Men and women and ages. We would have people in their 20s and people in their 80s. And those groups seemed to be performing better. And I didn't get that. I was like, how is this better? Why is belonging higher in the groups that are absolutely random? One person's depressed, one other person is coming in for their reason is they just lost a spouse 2 years ago. Another person has chronic pain. Another person's dying of cancer. We're not grouping all the cancer patients together. We're not grouping all of the, depressed girls in their 20s into a group. We're actually letting them be with the 82-year-old man who is dealing with deep end of life loss, right? And it's those groups that perform better. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how is this? And then when we'd get the subjective responses back from people, they would say things like, I didn't think I would have anything in common with these people in the group. But what I found that we had in common was not our age or our gender or our trauma background. We didn't bond over that. We bonded over the fact that we all wanted to be there for each other, no matter what each other was navigating. And so the belonging happened with a shared sense of purpose, not because of they brought a shared kind of thing from their past, but that they all were like, we all want to be here. I've got your back when you're going into that psilocybin journey. I've got your back, the 82-year-old said to the 22-year-old girl, in his group, right? Going, I'm here for you, and so this idea of a shared sense of vision and purpose began to be the thing that unified them rather than their own kind of social identity that they brought in from wherever, right? I'm a whatever and put it in, right? And so the more diverse the groups were, the better the belonging scale seemed to happen and the better the bond that happened in the group. And that blew me away and shocked me. I thought belonging would be higher when we had kind of stuff that people could relate to, like we're all in our 20s and we're all dealing with, whatever. And that actually was harder to create identity than when you had a diverse group of people, all with the same vision and goal of to say, we want to be authentic, honest, and show up for one another. And we are here to kind of not judge, but to hold space for whatever anyone is bringing. And it was in that diversity that belonging really skyrocketed. And so we really learned that the best way to heal is in really diverse groups of people with a shared vision and goal. And that became the kind of focus of the group. Now, we still do men's groups and women's groups, and they have a lot of power in when you have kind of shared gender identity. We have lots of mixed groups as well, but I do a lot of work with men. And in our men's groups, these men's circles become safe places for men to share their emotions in ways they've never been able to share with other men. And so creating a safe space for men, particularly, has been an incredible thing that we've discovered in our gathering group process. And so that's a little bit about kind of why belonging is the focus rather than, let's say, whatever trauma you might be bringing in.
Are there people that you have that have wanted to do a group that you thought, you know what, not the right fit?
Yeah. In our screening process, there's certain things that we're going to screen out. So if there's a history of schizophrenia, we're like, we want to make sure that you're stable and safe. And we probably won't take on schizophrenia. We have taken on bipolar. We've taken on when they are working with their therapist or psychiatrist, and we can reach out to their psychiatrist and say, this person has been going through a 12-week process. Are you willing to support them during this time? We understand that this medicine can bring up a lot for people that are, kind of bipolar. But we've actually found it when it's done in a safe container like this, can be very effective at helping people stabilize big manic and depressive episodes. But we're careful about those kinds of people that we bring on. The other one that we're going to screen out, but it's hard to find because most people aren't diagnosed with this. But some narcissistic personalities are can be tricky in groups because they're going to want to make the group about them, right? And so those are hard to we have had those slip through. Because the groups are very structured so that you only have 3 minutes, a bell goes off, and there's a sense that you need to kind of close your share. You can't really dominate a group because it's so structured that way. But you can have people that really don't want to become vulnerable because they think they're above that, and so that become a problem early on. And there's some things that we, as facilitators, really invite people into, and so we've had a few people that along the journey kind of say, you know what, this isn't working for me, and I want to drop out. But I'm out of the almost 1,000, maybe it's on one hand, the people that have kind of dropped out before the medicine because they don't like the idea of being in a group process. And, they signed up for it thinking that they'd be okay with it. But really, group process can bring up a lot of stuff. And for people that are really narcissistic, it's very difficult to be able to be honest and open with a group of people. So we try to steer those to more individual one-on-one therapy sessions to get them ready. I'm trying to think of other people that we screen out. Yeah, those are the big ones. Active suicidality. We don't we want to say, hey, you know what? We need to stabilize you before you come into a group process. Um, there, yeah, people dissociation. Good question. People that dissociate, that's often a trauma response, right? We actually think this process can be really helpful for them, and so people that have come in and said, well, I want to look at my dissociation, but I want to do it in a group space like this, because we give agency on the dosage. We might back the dose off for them and allow them to do a bit smaller dose, but feel really safe in the container. And so we want to get them back into their body while they're on the medicine so they can feel their body rather than escape from it. And so we have somatic practitioners that work with us, and we teach a lot of kind of movement-based medicine, some yoga, tai chi. These kinds of actions can be really helpful at getting a person back in their body so that they can feel again rather than dissociate. And so psilocybin is a very somatic-based medicine. and it can really help you feel back into your body. But we want to titrate that slowly. Now, the 8 weeks help people feel like what's it like to be seen by 8 other people on a call when you're sharing something really deep, right? So if people are going to dissociate, they will dissociate before the medicine. They'll be dissociating in the group process itself because it's so revealing, right? So then we can titrate that and work with them on that. So people taking SSRIs, nope, we bring them in. We ask that they do not taper their SSRIs. Don't mess with your dose. What we ask instead, they come to the retreat, not take the SSRI on the Friday or the Saturday for 2 days, and then we top them up a little bit with a higher dose. We work with natural psilocybin mushrooms. We have a special tea that we use, a lemon tech kind of tea, and because we work with a lot of cancer patients, we use a tea to really rid people of nausea. So our process, people don't get nauseous because they're not ingesting what's called the chitin. The chitin is the thin layer on the outside of a mushroom that reacts with our stomach. And that, if you grind it up with a coffee grinder and put it in a tea, you're going to get the chitin in the tea. But if you hand break the pieces into small pieces, like 1 centimeter, and then steep that in hot water with a bit of lemon, the psilocybin extracts comes into a clear tea. You can drink that. There's no chitin in it then, and there's almost no nausea. So we've had people, no one throws up on our protocol. And that's pretty amazing to work with end of life cancer patients and be able to say to them, you won't get nauseous on using mushrooms in this way. And so SSRIs, we bump that dose up a little bit. We move from about 3.5 grams of golden teacher to maybe 4, maybe 4.5. We never go more than 5 grams. We don't want someone totally blasted out where they're not aware of where they are. We don't want that. We don't believe that's ethical, and we don't believe that's safe. We want them to be aware that they're in a space where they are, what's going on at any time. At any time, they can take their eye shades off or their headset off. They're in a group playlist, so everyone's on the same playlist. They can take their headphones off. The music's also being played in the room. At any time, they can get up, they can walk around, they can go outside safely with another facilitator. And so you're not stuck on a mat, you're not trapped. And we teach them how to work with their body if there's stuck trauma. A lot of times, there's a lot of people will move into trauma shakes. So this is a normal pattern that your body will shake like an animal after trauma. You will bring them back into that. We will actually encourage the shake. We will work with the shake so that the energy can leave the body and people can feel renewed after that. So SSRIs, we still work with them. We just bring the dose up a little bit and we'll top them up so that the psilocybin can cut through. Now, there's sometimes that people have been on an SSRI for over 20 years. Those receptor sites are absolutely fried, and we're having a tough time, to be honest with you. If you've been on a SSRI every day for 20 years, you're going to have a tough time having a psychedelic experience. Then that doesn't mean there's not benefit. This is interesting. There's some really good research out of Hopkins that shows that SSRIs, even when you're on an SSRI, psilocybin is still doing this neuroplastic work, even if you don't get the kind of experience of kind of ego disillusionment that often occurs on a psychedelic. You might not feel it as strongly, but you can still work with these internal realities. Your parts work. You can still get people to move inside to get some deep trauma release. It's just they're not going to have the classic psychedelic experience. So we have to work with them on expectations and say, you're not going to have kind of a classic psychedelic experience, but because you're in a group, you're going to still go through a process. And so as we've, interviewed people, and I would say 20% of the people coming into our program are on SSRIs. This is a very normal reality for a Canadian population. You cannot avoid this. I would say 60% of the people coming into gathering groups have never done psychedelics. They are psychedelic naive. So this is their first time ever taking a psychedelic is in this process. So we're doing a lot of education and kind of preparing them of what to expect. But because they're in this safe group, the model, they are really excited to be able to feel safe in a group. So those are some of the things Antidepressants pro the antidepressants don't pose a risk. I'm going to say the risk is just that they are not going to have the experience that they think they're going to have when it's a really high SSRI. But again, the model itself provides most of the heavy lifting. You know, when we do follow-ups with people 6 months after a gathering group, we'd say, you know, what was your experience like as you reflect back on gathering groups? Almost nobody talks about the psychedelic. And that's so bizarre. Like no one says, "Oh, that is psychedelic was so great." They would say that group process what changed my life. I've never felt safe before in front of people. I felt safe in that group. That group gave me the tools to be able to kind of really feel into who I am, to feel known by other people. I've never been known by other people. Many of our groups carry on after the 12-week formality ends and they stay. We give them questions, we give them tools for them to stay connecting with each other. And well, one out of every three group continues on for about a year on their own without a therapist or with a facilitator, using kind of lay-led process to continue to connect with one another. Those are very, very powerful kind of groups. So yeah, those are some of the answers to that. I'd love to take some questions though. Are there any questions, or you want to put them in the chat, or Karen, we can keep chatting. But
Well, while people think of their questions and jump in, can you talk about the role of the facilitators and sitters?
yeah.
First of all, who are they? What training are you providing with them? And what are they actually doing as part of supporting that group experience?
Yeah. So first of all, and this is it's hard to say to this a mental health clinic, but the biggest challenge for the work that we do is to teach therapists to unlearn everything they've learned about therapy. And that's really sad. My wife's a therapist. Most of the people in our model are therapists, but the people that had the hardest time in this work are therapists. Nurses do extremely well as facilitators. They're trained differently. They're trained in group process. They're trained to work with patients on teams. They're trained to do patient advocacy work. Doulas are some of our best facilitators. They work with the body to help women go through a process of delivering babies. There were some of our best space holders are doulas because they're not scared of the body. They know how to get people into the proper positions. They know how to work with energy in a body to get the body naturally moving energy. Therapists, we're trained not to touch and we're trained to stay in our heads, right? And that's again cognitive behavioral therapy. Yay, it's been important, but this work is very different. This is somatic work, and this is group process, and this is about vulnerability. And in order to do this work as a facilitator, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And most of the time, you are not trained that way because that will dysregulate your client. If you're talking about how you're struggling, your client is going to go, "What the fuck is going on? I don't want to be around you. You don't have it together." Right? Because we set up a power dynamic in the typical Western model of psychotherapy. This process levels the playing field and says the facilitator answers all the same questions as everybody else each week. They're talking about where do they feel fear in their body? What brings them into anxiety? And what brings them into flow? What are the traumas that they've had to navigate in their life? They're answering those questions in this process. So what we have found is that it really takes some untraining to become a good facilitator with gathering groups. What does it take? It takes an openness to be seen by other people. It takes a willingness to be vulnerable. And it's a willingness to trust the group process that you are not the expert. The group is the smartest people in the room. It's the group that's smarter than you. And that is a very different mindset because we've been trained to have the answers. We've read more than everybody else. But in this model, what we're saying is that there's a collective intelligence that you're turning on in group process. Dr. Irvin Yalom, who is the kind of the guru behind group psychotherapy, he's written some of the best work on this, and he has the 13 therapeutic factors of group process. And in those factors, he really nails what goes on in gathering groups. It's this idea that you recognize that you're not alone, that you belong with other people, that there's a sense of what gets turned on in each other is a sense of you're witnessing everybody else in the group, and so empathy is built. Empathy isn't usually built in a typical psychotherapeutic dynamic because they don't have empathy for you. You're trying to teach them to have empathy for themselves. But what if the best way to teach empathy and self-compassion is by teaching people to have compassion for 8 other people week after week after week after week? That they actually see this process modeled and they begin to see it happen to them, being witnessed, that they then begin to bring self compassion inside because they've seen it modeled week after week. And so, to be a facilitator with gathering, we use an apprenticeship model. So you have to go through it once as a practitioner, just experience it not with the hat of a therapist, but just as a participant. Go through the process for yourself. Allow yourself to kind of unravel in the group process and be held by a group of others. And we typically bring therapists into non-therapy groups, and we ask them not to declare that they're a therapist. We do that very intentionally because the moment someone says on the call, "Well, I'm a therapist," all the other people just kind of roll their eyes and like, "Okay, well, then you're better than us." Okay. And so we ask them, please just come in as a human. No one else talks about their jobs. No one else is saying, by the way, I work in the mines. And we don't talk about that. We talk about our heart every week. And so we ask them to kind of go in as just a normal person with 6 other normals. And there might be 2 therapists in the group. And so you're just experiencing it once for yourself. Then the second time you go through it, you'll be a facilitator with an experienced gathering facilitator in a kind of a partnership pairing. And then the third time, you're ready to kind of facilitate your own group and hold space for your own group. And we give training. So we'll have online training where we put you into cohorts. Everything is group based. So all the training is done in groups. So we'll put you in a cohort and we'll say, okay, here's the typical 5 things that happen in a gathering group that can kind of, someone's not sharing. Maybe their share is only 10 seconds. How do you ask a question that elicits a deeper response? What happens when people start wanting to fix other people rather than witness them? This is the thing that can happen, right? How do you jump in without shame and not correct, but model, right? So we're really teaching the skill of modeling and kind of teaching and coaching rather than therapizing. And so we teach people that through an apprentice-based modeling. And we give you feedback, and we'll teach you how to facilitate really effective groups and to how to hold space. We always have 4 people holding space for 8 in a group journey. And we do use therapeutic touch. So we talk a lot about consent to touch. This is there's a fine line here between how to use touch effectively, safely, and ethically. And recognizing that in many psychedelic containers, touch has been abused, and it's been the pendulum swung to say we can't touch people. This medicine is very somatic. We need to be able to ground people as simply with a handhold. So we have 4 places we are allowed to touch: the hand, the outside of the shoulder, sometimes the top of the head, and sometimes the bottom of the feet with pressure. So those are the 4 touch points that gathering groups uses. And people can consent to that prior to the altered state. We go through a whole process with them around touch and what kind of touch feels safe to them. What maybe touch has been really triggering for them. They don't want any touch. Maybe they only want touch by a female facilitator and no male touch. Maybe they only want, so all of that is discussed and consented to before they go into an altered state. And some people don't want any touch, and that's totally fine as well. But we teach facilitators how to use touch effectively and how to sit with people, hold their hand, and not kind of we're not doing any we're not talking with people while they're on the medicine. We're going to work with them in a different kind of capacity. This isn't like MDMA psychotherapy where you get them on MDMA and they can move into their trauma space and they can really process and talking it with it. Psilocybin isn't like that. We're not using the brain to talk to people. We're using the body and we're using energy and group process to kind of unstuck trauma in people's bodies. So it's a very different approach in a group container. So those are a little bit about some of the skills that we're going to train and why we use an apprenticeship model to certify people in this process.
Very cool. We've just been coming close to the end of the hour. Does anybody have any questions for Peg?
I'll go.
Yeah.
I mean, great. This is a great presentation, and this is something that's a huge, as I mentioned before in our team meeting. This is where I want to go in my career. And so I've done a bit of training. I work for another clinic here in Ottawa. You probably know them. They were heavily involved with Theracell.
Yeah.
Yeah. My other supervisor is Dave Phillips, who
Oh, yeah. Well, Dave is one of our facilitators and is head of our clinical for gathering. He's on our board, so he's actually our board chair. So
okay, yeah. So my question is centered around spirituality and how spirituality is incorporated into some of this training. Because I found that with some of the training facilities like Theracell, it's not a big part of it.
Yeah.
They have a little part on indigenous communities and the spirituality there, but not enough to cover which I think is really important in the whole process is that sense of spirituality that comes out of it after, and in that group setting. So. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, great question, Randy. I think this is a growing edge for us as well. I think in the beginning, there was a sense that we've got to make this, make this scientifically as rigorous as possible so that we get, approved by clinical trials and these kinds of things. And yet, man, everyone's coming out of these journeys talking about connection to something larger than themselves. So what am I going to do when 90% of the people coming through our program come out of the experience and saying, I had some kind of mystical experience. Can you help me make sense of it? And I can't just say, la, 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 sorry, no, we're secular. We don't talk about that. When again, not like 1 in every 10, like the majority of the people going through it are coming into it. So it's a really important topic to bring up, Randy. And I guess the way we've landed on it is rather than putting kind of a type of spiritual framework over it, we've kind of framed it this way. We've used internal family systems as one of the best kind of models or languages that help us make sense of the inner reality, knowing that there's parts. And so Dick Schwartz just, with Sounds True, which is an organization that publishes a lot of kind of spiritual based stuff, they just had a course with Dick Schwartz on IFS and spirituality. And I thought this was the first time, just started in January of 2026 here. And it was the first time he kind of come on record to say, listen, at the end of the day, self energy is really the divine within all of us, right? So this is self energy is divine within. You could, switch that back and forth. And so rather than thinking about spirituality as a God out there, I speak of the divine as that within all of us. And it's your birthright as a human being that you have this divine energy within you that has been clouded over, has been scaled over, and that there's an opportunity for you to kind of peel back the layers to discover the divine within yourself. And whether that's Buddhism or whether that's mystical Christianity, where Christ would say, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. It's not outside of you. That the kingdom is right here. It's not out there in heaven. Heaven is here. And so I kind of have affinity with IFS language. And so that's the model that we have used to talk about spirituality so that when people kind of have these mystical experiences, They can say, I encountered myself. I encountered this spirit within, and I recognize that I am connected to something larger than me, that I am connected to divine love, and that I belong in the universe, that I am loved. And this is how they begin to language it. And when you begin to feel this energy start coming online, and then we begin to say, what if you could cultivate a practice where you can access that anytime you want without psychedelics? You've now felt it like something inside of you, but wouldn't it be cool to be able to now access that with breath, with meditation, with movement, with yoga, with running, whatever, but you could come back to that centered place where you know who you are and this self energy of compassion, of clarity, can come online and be aware, can access to you. So we've kind of used IFS language to kind of talk about the spiritual reality that many people encounter through this process. But Randy, I think we're on the edge of being able to really give language to this. People are longing for this. The issue is not, I'm kind of used to be like nervous, like, oh, sorry that we're talking about spirituality. It's the opposite. People are like, how come you're not talking about spirituality more? Doesn't matter, Buddhist, Muslim, whoever comes in, they want more spirituality, not less. And they don't want, bullshit power religion. They want a spirituality that's deep and can really help them find that deep sense of love and purpose in their life. So I think your question, Randy, is really big. And I think there's lots of work and research to be done on this. I'm part of a cohort that's studying this at Hopkins. They're just about to do their second thing in May, dosing religious leaders from different world religions all together. So I'm part of a cohort. I'm a minister. I'm part of a cohort of 15 of different world religion leaders that will all be in May doing a high dose psychedelic experience together and looking at what happens when we do this in a container together as a group from different world religions. So
I hope there's a documentary out of that. That would be really interesting to see.
I'm bringing my camera. Yeah, we're bringing.
It's like you're carrying on the work of Timothy Leary and Ram Dass before they got fired from Harvard.
I know. Isn't that fascinating, eh? So, I love this stuff, Randy. Thanks for the question.
Right, thanks.
We could literally, I think, talk about this for at least another hour. It's been fascinating.
Yeah.
If people want more information about gathering groups, how do they reach you? And you've mentioned a whole bunch of articles. How do we get the titles of all the articles that you touched on?
So, the best thing is reach out to me directly. It's peg@gatheringgroups.ca. And I respond to all the emails that I get sent. So if you're interested, say, hey, I like this presentation. Send me some links on this and this and this. I can do that. If you're interested in our program, gatheringgroups.ca. We do have some groups being launched in Toronto and London area. And so there's some opportunities there. You can always come out to Victoria or Vancouver here. We have 2 retreat centers out here. And we also have a retreat center we're working with in Amsterdam if you want to have a fun experience out there and go out there. So we have lots of options that are coming up. And so those are some ways to get a hold of us.
For those of us who are prepared to take the therapist hot off enough and would be interested in becoming a facilitator, what are the training options?
Yeah, the training options is first of all is just to go through a group, and the number one thing is just to go through. You can indicate, yeah, I'm interested in being trained, and we'll put that we'll note that in your application, and then we will put you in a training track. But the first step is to just kind of go through a group. The cost of a group with a 2-night overnight retreat is $2,500 Canadian. If you have benefits, I don't know how I know in BC and Alberta, we can work with benefits because it's a 12-week process, and we work with registered clinical counselors. They can bill these as group psychotherapy groups. So there might be an opportunity to do that in Ontario as well.
Yeah, we do that in Ontario as well.
Okay, yeah. So because they're individually billed over the course of 12 weeks, each session becomes an opportunity. We just can't bill the retreat. The retreat portion can't be billed out, but most of it, almost about 70% of it, can be covered. So that's great. So yeah,
so in Ontario you can
build a retreat.
It's experiential retreat is the way it's put onto the receipt, and it gets covered.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
great to know. I'm going to reach out to you after, Randy, and just get the details of that. But that's really good to know. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
so so please reach out. We'd love to have you guys in a group, and then put you into a training cohort, yeah, it's a to me it's the most magical thing I've ever been part of in my life, is to watch a group of people transform over the course of 12 weeks, hold each other with depth and compassion, and really see lives transformed. It's absolutely amazing.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. As somebody who's been through a journey with PEG, I can absolutely speak to the transformative nature of that group experience. It really is unique.
Thanks, Karen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure, Anne or Faith, who has got the control of the recording. I think we can end there.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me on, Karen. It was great to
That
meet
was
some of you,
awesome.
and
Yeah, it was nice catching up with you
yeah,
again
it
to
was
hear
really
like
great.
kind of what you're up to. I
Yeah.
think the last time we talked, you were still looking for getting funding on a clinical trial.
Yeah.
So it's amazing
Yes.
to see that this has taken
It's
off the way it
really
has.
taken off. Yeah, it's really taken off. And it's really cool. The couple of leads, and this is, you know, the moment that we got some partnerships, some universities, that's when some of these organizations really started to reach out. So we're working with an organization called PIR in the UK. It's Psychedelics in Recovery.
Yep.
It's the folks in recovery are often shamed if they use psychedelics, because it's considered another drug, and you can be kicked out and lose your sobriety pin. So this organization was founded as a way to work with psychedelics for those that are in recovery. And so the head of a PIR has gone through a gathering group, is now offering a gathering group model for those in active recovery. It's a really cool initiative what we're partnering with. Also, we're working with Heroic Hearts. They're a large organization that works with veterans, both in the US, Canada, and in the UK. They have come to us to put together a model using the gathering group model to work with their veterans. So we're just doing a test with some of their groups using ayahuasca. We've never done ayahuasca with the gathering group model, but we think that this would be a really good addition, because ayahuasca, it's a powerful medicine, but sadly, it's really designed for people who live in the jungle. It's not really designed for people that are in the West. You need to be part of a community to do this ayahuasca. But most ayahuasca is done. You just drop in on a Friday night, don't know anyone, take this big dose, then try to pull it all together later on, and you don't know anyone, and you have to go home and integrate. And that's really not what we're looking for. And so this gathering group model will co-regulate a group of 8 before they come to the jungle. Then they'll do the ayahuasca as a group, as a gathering group, and then integrate that back in for 4 weeks after. So it's going to be a really interesting test to use that medicine. I've done ayahuasca, and so I know the medicine, but it's just I haven't found that that's the medicine for this population, or this for the Westerner. I really think psilocybin is a better medicine for the Westerner. It doesn't have the cultural baggage that ayahuasca does. Psilocybin can grow anywhere, and it's really the world's medicine. Doesn't belong to one indigenous group, and so you're not appropriating when you use psilocybin. Psilocybin, it can be grown anywhere, and we can draw from indigenous practices without having to appropriate. And so I really think that the future work is through psilocybin-based group models. I think they're going to be the most effective.
Very cool. The work that you're doing with Wilfrid Laurier, with Rachel, you
Yeah.
guys were working on developing some kind of program. What is the program?
Yeah, it's at first of all, the first start of it is going to be a certificate, and it's going to be a little bit of history, but it's really going to be based around group process. So people will be put into cohorts, and the dream is that by the time it launches in September of this year, that our wellness clinical trial will be off the ground, which will allow people to apply for Wilfrid Laurier, get into the certificate, and get a seat in a legal clinical trial group experience with gathering groups. So this is the dream, that we partner with the university, you get into a cohort, you're trained with that cohort, and you get a psychedelic experience legally through a clinical trial process using the gathering group model. So that's kind of what our dream is for September. And we're just crossing our fingers that all of those, the ethics will come through in the next month or two for us to be able to offer that.
Target audience for that is who?
It's really anyone. I mean, they're seeing it as an opportunity to bring in not just therapists, but anyone who wants to experience a group-based process. They're looking at social workers. They're putting it out to anyone, but their focus is on people with a designation, what they call it, professional designation. So
Okay, so
could be,
they're looking for people in the helping professions.
yeah, helping professions, yeah,
Okay,
massage therapists, whoever, yeah,
very cool.
yeah,
Alrighty,
yeah.
amazing.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much. It was great
This
to
was
meet some of
great.
you. And again, reach out to me anytime and I'd love to connect.
We'll do that. Yeah, I think it's time for
Yes.
another journey.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love that.
All right.
Okay, folks, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
You bet.